Hey, what do you think about your mom?
What about her? She's slow and can't even do household chores.
Since she's your mom, I should stop you from talking like that about her. But you're actually right, so I can't say anything.
I let out a huge sigh.
Would you be happy if you got a new mom?
Huh? Yeah, of course. Huh? A new mom? What does that mean? Various possibilities race through my mind. Cheating, divorce, all unpleasant thoughts come to mind. But as much as he is, I doubt he has stooped so low as to cheat on me. But in the next moment, my suspicions turned into reality.
Right now, I'm actually seeing someone.
My husband flashed a sleazy smile. Seriously? Congrats! Anger reaching its boiling point, I declared. I quit being a mom and a wife. Today is also the end for me as the breadwinner of this house. The two of them were stunned, but it didn't matter. I felt utter despair and vowed to take revenge. My name is Susan. I'm just a housewife and I'm 35. I was a career woman working hard, but I started doing household chores after I got married to my husband Eric. Meeting my husband wasn't just a typical romance. It dates back to 11 years ago. Back then, I was a team leader in a major project boosting sales. I think I was a good team player, contributing a lot to the company I was working for. Recognized for my performance, I was even promoted. I believe I was respected by my colleagues and bosses. I had decided to live dedicated to my work, so naturally I had little interest in marriage. My family and friends would occasionally drop hints about marriage, saying,
Have you found someone nice?
or, maybe it's time for you to think about marriage. But I consistently responded, I'm not really thinking about marriage right now. Then the word marriage suddenly became a reality. One day after finishing work, Mr. Hanson, my department head, approached me as I was about to leave.
Susan, do you have some time after this? I have something I'd like to discuss.
Mr. Hanson was a reliable worker who had climbed up to a managerial position at the age of 40. When I joined the company as a new graduate, he kindly taught me the ropes. Of course, I couldn't refuse an invitation from such a person like him. Yes, I'm free after this.
That's great. Shall we go to a nearby bar then?
I quickly agreed and tidied up my desk before leaving the office with him. So, what's this talk about?
Oh, I completely forgot. Guess I can't handle alcohol after all.
Once we arrived at the bar, Mr. Hanson immediately downed a couple of beers, his face flushing red. I wondered what was going on since he wasn't usually a heavy drinker.
I wanted to talk to you about your arranged marriage.
Excuse me? I was puzzled, having firmly conveyed that I wasn't interested in marriage because of my dedication to work. I'm not really interested in getting married at the moment.
Just hear me out. Actually, I have a nephew about your age.
Oh. Mr. Hanson continued.
His name is Eric. His wife actually left him a while ago.
That's unfortunate.
I know this might sound a bit strange, but his ex-wife and you look exactly alike.
Mr. Hanson looked a bit embarrassed as he said that.
I know it's rude for me to ask you to meet up with Eric just because you look just like his ex-wife, but he has a young child, so...
I realized his point. If the child hardly remembers their mother's face, the child wouldn't question it much if Eric remarried a woman who looked just like her. A mother's presence is necessary for the child, and coincidentally, there I was, single, close in age, and resembling his ex-wife. Mr. Hanson wanted me there for Eric's child. Honestly, I was appalled. My feelings were completely disregarded, but perhaps that was why he asked me to have a chat with him privately like this. Nevertheless, since I hadn't met Eric yet, there was no way to respond to him. I understand the situation, but honestly, since I haven't met Eric, I can't really say anything about this.
I understand. That's why I've asked to have a chat with you about this. Actually, I've casually mentioned this to Eric, so why don't you meet him just once?
Honestly, I wasn't interested in getting married. But since Mr. Hanson, who was there for me as my boss, was in trouble, I wanted to help him as much as possible. After some thought, I agreed to meet Eric just once. A few days later, I finally met Eric. He had reserved a high-class restaurant, and not usually going to such places, I was a bit nervous as I headed to the restaurant.
Good evening.
A nice tall man came up to me and greeted me. And good evening. You're Eric, right?
Yes, I apologize for the late introduction. Nice to meet you. I'm Eric Hansen. I've heard quite a bit about you from my uncle.
Eric was a man with notably long legs. His suit was so well tailored, he could have been mistaken for a model, and he looked far more handsome in person than in his photos. Prompted by Eric, I moved to our table and we talked over dinner. Throughout the meal, we discussed various topics, but he never mentioned that I resembled his ex-wife. He was serious throughout the evening, but his straightforwardness was slightly appealing to me. That night ended with our parting, but we began dating frequently after that, and I naturally fell in love with him. Then one day he invited me back to the restaurant where we first met. After finishing our meal, we were drinking wine when I felt something cold and metallic touch my lips. Huh?
Take a closer look.
At the bottom of the glass was a ring sparkling with diamonds.
Over the various conversations we've had, I've come to love you, Susan.
Yes.
As you might have heard from my uncle, honestly, you do resemble my ex-wife.
Yes. I felt a bittersweet emotion, but decided to listen to him till the end.
However, the reason I fell in love with you isn't because of that. I'm completely smitten with who you are inside.
Eric's face was slightly red. It wasn't just because of the alcohol.
If you would accept someone like me, would you marry me?
Eric was always gentlemanly. During our dates, he would escort me, engage in serious conversation, and was generous with compliments. I had always focused on my work, but I realized I had other desires as a woman. Yes, I'd love to. And so we got married. As a condition of our marriage, I agreed to quit my job and become a full-time housewife. Though it was hard to give up my career, I felt committed to supporting Eric. After the marriage, Eric's daughter Tracy and I lived peacefully as a family of 3. Just hearing this, you might think it ended as a happy family, but life doesn't always turn out so simply. Now, 11 years into our marriage, I've started to feel that Eric's behavior has significantly worsened over the past few years. I understand he's tired from work, but he quickly becomes irritable over things he doesn't like. It's a change I wouldn't have imagined from the man I first met. But well, that's inevitable. While enduring his complaints, I continued my role as a housewife. Yet worse was to come. Influenced by Eric's behavior, even Tracy, now 12, began to hurl insults at me. When I warned Tracy for her language, Eric would interfere, saying,
"Don't be so angry. It's your fault for not being able to do the housework properly."
Tracy, thinking she could shield herself with her father's support, mostly hurled insults at me when Eric was around. At first, I thought it was just an early rebellious phase, but this behavior was clearly not acceptable. Even when I asked her to clean up, she showed no intention of doing so, and instead would mess things up even more, saying, "Mom, you clean it up." I discussed this with Eric as it wasn't good for her upbringing, but it seemed he had no interest in parenting. Instead, he blamed me, saying that it was my responsibility she turned out this way.
Being a housewife must be nice. Not working and just doing household chores is such a good life,
he would say almost every day. Even though it was Eric who had initially asked me to become a housewife, I couldn't accept his attitude. Even when I protested, Eric would say,
"Talk like that when you can manage all the household chores perfectly. After 10 years, you still can't even clean properly. You're so useless."
completely ignoring me and even adding insults. I was reaching my limit. Honestly, no matter how hard I tried, my love for Eric and Tracy was fading. I felt bad for Mr. Hanson, but this was something I just couldn't handle. Unless Eric's behavior improved, this would likely continue. Being verbally abused by both my husband and daughter, I persevered, doing what I had to do. But even those days had to come to an end. One day, as I was leaving my room to go to the bathroom, I overheard Tracy and Eric talking in the living room. I listened half-heartedly, expecting them to be talking badly about me, but the content of their conversation was far worse than any insult about me.
"Hey, Tracy, what do you think about your mom?"
"What about her? She's slow and can't even do housework."
"Since she's your mom, I should stop you from talking like that about her. But you're actually right, so I can't say anything."
I let out a huge sigh.
"Would you be happy if you got a new mom?"
Huh? Yeah, totally. Huh? A new mom? What does that even mean? Various possibilities raced through my mind. Cheating, divorce, all sorts of unpleasant thoughts came to mind, but as much as who Eric is, I doubted he would stoop so low as to cheat on me. But in the next moment, my suspicions turned into reality.
Right now, I'm seeing someone.
Eric flashed a sleazy smile. No, normally would a father openly discuss cheating on his wife in front of his own daughter? This is unacceptable. He had changed so much from the Eric I once knew.
Remember the woman who was with us when I took you out the other time, Tracy?
Yeah. Was her name Rachel Anderson? She was beautiful.
Actually, I've started dating her.
Eric had a smug grin on his face as he said this. Seriously? Congrats! I couldn't help but see Tracy's innocent smile as grotesque. I had thought that perhaps we could revert to a happy family if he changed his behavior, but that hope quickly shattered. Desperately trying to control my urge to storm out, I began recording the conversation using the voice recorder function on my smartphone. Even after I started recording, Eric and Tracy cheerfully talked about his dates with his side piece. I realized that any affection I might have had for them had completely faded. Humans are indeed simple creatures. From the moment I knew I was betrayed, I completely lost all my love for them. Though my feelings had been fading, somewhere deep down I still loved them. I loved them unconditionally, simply because they were my family. How stupid of me. I was the only one loving them, while they loved someone else. Thinking this, frustration overwhelmed me and tears fell from my eyes. I swore to myself that I would have my revenge. Afterward, I hired a detective agency to investigate Eric's mistress. Since I knew her name, I expected results soon. By this point, I was somewhat looking forward to executing my revenge. When I returned home, I was insulted by Tracy as usual. Mom, you can't even hold a job and you got out? I felt nothing anymore. All I felt was disgust for the person in front of me. By the way, I have an overnight school trip tomorrow, so make sure you prepare my lunch. Her casual demand disgusted me, but I suddenly felt a rush of panic. What? Tomorrow? You should have told me earlier. Why didn't you tell me sooner? In my panic and anger, I scolded my daughter harshly. However, Eric, who was listening from the living room sofa, said indifferently,
Don't shout at Tracy, just go and make it quickly.
I no longer had the energy to argue and headed to the kitchen. While I was preparing tomorrow's lunch, I could hear Eric and Tracy talking in the living room.
Tracy, you shouldn't become like your mom. Being a housewife is so easy that only useless people like her can do it. You're smart, because you have my genes, so make sure you work at a company in the future, okay?
Yeah, of course. It's the same whether Mom is here or not. I'll work and live it on my own. If it weren't for the first part, Tracy's words would be a perfect answer for a child. But now I felt detached, as if her behavior was someone else's problem. And during their insults about me, I somehow finished preparing the lunch and returned to the living room. Eric was lazily scrolling through his smartphone on the sofa, still smirking, probably spending money on online games as usual. When I looked at the screen, there was a photo of a young woman. It was probably a picture of his mistress. How dare he brazenly look at it on the sofa? My anger towards my husband, who continued to show interest in his mistress even at such a time, and my daughter, who kept looking down on me, reached its peak. I gave up on cleaning the kitchen and went to my room, deciding to stay there for the night. I could always hear them bad-mouthing me from behind the door, but I didn't care anymore. I was leaving this house tomorrow. Yes, I had decided to leave. It might have been an emotional decision, but I had intended to leave this house ever since I discovered the affair. It just happened to be tomorrow. I no longer cared about either of them. The next day, as Tracy was getting ready for school and Eric was dressing in his suit for work, I said, I quit being a mother and a wife. I'm also done being the breadwinner of this house today. And then I left the house. They seemed puzzled by my words, but I didn't care anymore. I put my suitcases in the car and drove to my parents' house, which was a bit away. So, about me being the breadwinner of my family, actually, since Tracy started elementary school, I noticed that the amount Eric contributed to the household budget had visibly decreased. He probably spent it on his game or even did gambling before putting it into the household account. Thinking this couldn't continue, I secretly started an IT consulting company and began working from home. Thanks to my background as a career woman, my business was going well and sales were steadily increasing. Before I knew it, the money I was bringing in exceeded Eric's salary, and I had become the main financial supporter of the household. The day after I left, Eric began sending a barrage of emails to me, and my smartphone notifications quickly piled up. He probably realized that the household account was nearly empty. Just before leaving, I had withdrawn the amount I had earned from the joint account, so there was almost nothing left. I ignored everything as he had brought it upon himself, but eventually Eric, who looked really impatient, showed up at my parents' house. The doorbell rang, and when I checked the intercom, an exhausted-looking Eric was there. He kept ringing the bell, which was becoming a nuisance to the neighbors, so I reluctantly opened the door, and Eric immediately came to the doorstep.
I'm really sorry. Please come back home. There's no one to clean around the house and it's a complete mess.
Even now, Eric referred to me as if I were just a maid for cleaning. It seemed like belittling me had become a habit, and even his apology was demeaning. No need for an incompetent wife, right? I said dismissively and shut the door. Eric continued to ring the bell for a while, but after I kept ignoring him, he gave up and trudged away. A week later, Tracy called me, seemingly in a state of desperation. Mom, ever since you left, Dad hasn't been going to work, and he's coming home later and later. I can't do housework, so my clothes are dirty, and everyone in class mocks me. I snorted. I might have a bad personality, but this was their own doing. So? So? What do you mean, so? It's all your fault for abandoning everything and leaving, Mom. Come back. Tracy directed her anger at me, showing no signs of apologizing. You've always called me a useless mom, right? Since you're not useless like me, surely you can easily do the housework, right? Tracy seemed at a loss for words, but I felt nothing anymore. Do the housework yourself. I left her with those words and hung up the phone. After receiving calls for a while, I set Tracy's number to be blocked. I thought I could finally relax, but a few days later, Eric Hansen came to visit my parents' house again with Tracy. He appeared even more haggard than before. Eric pleaded with me to come back home, mostly because he was having financial troubles. You have a job, so you'll be fine, right? I said dismissively, and Eric shook his head sideways.
I lent all my money to someone since she seemed to be in trouble.
Someone? That's ridiculous. He should just admit it was his mistress he lent money to. I was surprised that he still had some guilt.
The money from our joint account suddenly disappeared. You took it, didn't you? I know I was wrong too, so please return at least some of it.
He said that and treated me like a thief. How selfish. I told him that I had been covering the majority of our household expenses with the revenue from my company. My company uses a virtual space to conduct meetings as if we're meeting in person, and it's become very popular. Oh, by the way, my income easily surpasses yours. That can't be.
You're lying.
I'm not lying. After all the times you've belittled me, I was the breadwinner of this family. I paid for the rent, groceries, utilities, Tracy's allowance, and all her school fees from my own pocket. Seeing them collapse to their knees was just hilarious.
Whatever, just come back. Otherwise I won't move from here,
Eric said, bawling like a child throwing a tantrum. They pleaded so persistently that I thought it might finally settle things, so I reluctantly agreed to return home with them. When I arrived home, I was shocked by the mess. Clothes were piled up like mountains, and garbage bags had accumulated because they hadn't been thrown out. Eric seemed relieved that I had come home and began to act arrogantly again.
You see, work like the housekeeper you are.
I sighed at my incredibly foolish husband and responded, Why did you drag me back if you're going to act like this? I'm useless, right? So why don't you have your mistress do it? Eric was taken aback by feigned ignorance.
Huh? My mistress? What are you talking about?
I shoved the detective's report in his face and played the recordings from my phone. I have all the evidence. Weren't you openly talking about your dates with Tracy in the living room? Didn't you hear? Seeing the look of doom on Eric's face, he was at a loss for words. I'm going to divorce you. I hope you won't contact me again.
Don't say that. You're perfect as a housekeeper here. This is where you shine. Stay here, okay?
Eric was relentless in his nagging. Are you still not getting it? I earn much more than you could ever compare to your salary. Who would willingly stay in such a place? If this is going nowhere, we might as well go to court. Do you think you can win after all the times you took advantage of me and yelled at me? When I threatened him with a lawsuit, he had nothing more to say. And what about me? It's awful to abandon your own daughter. I'm still a minor. You should take care of me. I can't stay in this house anymore, so you should take me to Grandma's. Tracy continued to insult me. She always had an arrogant attitude, just like her father. I firmly refused and told my daughter a harsh truth, that she and I had no blood relation. It's impossible. After all, Tracy and I are complete strangers. Huh? Wait, what? That means you're not my child. You wouldn't know since you were too young. What does that mean? You're not my mother? What's going on, Dad?
Oh, well, your real mom ran away. But you see, Susan looks just like your real mom, so it was really helpful that you got used to her so quickly.
What? You've been deceiving me this whole time? I don't understand. Tracy burst into tears. I tried to act as her mother, but in the end it came to this. I no longer felt any love. Since you've always mocked me, this is only natural. I dismissed Tracy's tearful pleas. Tracy began to attack Eric Hansen, shouting, You've ruined my life! Fix this, you jerk! By then I had already left the house. Even after returning to my parents' home, I continued to receive calls from them for a while, but as I kept ignoring them, they eventually gave up. Later, I successfully sued Eric and his mistress for compensation and managed to get a divorce. As for Tracy, although she used to be assertive, she has become quite introverted and now spends her time quietly at the edge of the school. Given her personality, she doesn't seem to have many friends, and it appears no one is really looking out for her. Eric, on the other hand, has run out of money and has stopped going to work regularly, which has led to his demotion. I heard that the two of them have moved to a shabby apartment. I hope Tracy acknowledges her past mistakes and grows into a responsible adult. As for Eric, I now realize he was just a trivial man who was abandoned by his previous wife. And so the tumultuous chapter of my married life has come to an end. Now my work is going well, and my days are busier with a new project that seems to promise even more activity. However, this busyness is nothing compared to the pain of the past. I am fully committed to making this project a success. I will continue to move forward towards a bright future.